The palace shook like a living thing. Explosions echoed through the marble halls as smoke and dust filled the air. Screams mixed with alarms, and the golden banners of the Zelara Empire burned in the fire. The alien queen, Sarathia, stood at the center of the throne chamber. Her silver eyes wide with disbelief. Around her, guards in shining armor dropped their weapons, fear written on their faces. The invading fleet had broken the city's shield faster than anyone imagined. "Retreat!" one of the guards shouted. Another shouted, "They are inside the palace!" Their courage vanished like dust in the wind. Only one figure didn't move, a human soldier, Sergeant Mark Hale. He stood tall beside the throne, his rifle aimed at the massive door that shook under enemy fire. He was the only human in the entire royal defense, a foreigner among aliens, yet in that moment, he looked like the last wall between life and death. "Go," Sarathia commanded, her voice trembling. "You are not one of us, human. Leave this place before they find you." Mark didn't even turn his head. "Not leaving, Your Majesty," he said quietly. "Not while you're still here." The first explosion tore the door apart. Dark armored invaders stormed in, metal beasts from the Orion Syndicate. The guards screamed and ran, their footsteps fading down the corridors. Sarathia stepped back as the enemies entered. Eyes glowing red under their helmets, Mark's rifle roared. Each shot was like thunder. One enemy fell. Then another and another. He moved like a machine built for one purpose, to protect. Sarathia watched, frozen. Humans were known as a young race, reckless and emotional. But she had never seen such determination. "Not even from her own elite guard behind me," Mark shouted. He tossed a grenade that lit the chamber like a small sun. The explosion threw the attackers back, filling the air with smoke and fire. "Why do you stay?" Sarathia whispered. "You owe me nothing." Mark reloaded calmly, eyes on the burning door. "I made a promise," he said. "And humans don't break promises." Sighed. The sky burned red as enemy ships hovered over the city. The palace towers fell one by one, sending waves of dust across the capital. The world of Zelara was dying. But in that throne room, one human refused to surrender. Sarathia could hear the invaders regrouping outside. She turned to the soldier again. "You cannot win." "They are too many," Mark smiled. A tired human smile. "Maybe," he said. "But I can make them remember what happens when you corner a human." The door exploded again. This time, hundreds of armored enemies rushed in. Sarathia covered her face as light and fire filled the hall. Mark stood in the middle of it all. His armor cracked, his weapon overheated, but his eyes still burning with defiance. Then everything went white. The sound vanished, and the palace ceiling began to collapse. Sarathia screamed his name, but the smoke swallowed him whole. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on the cold ground. The throne room was gone, replaced by rubble and silence. There was no sign of the human soldier, only his rifle, half buried in the ashes. Still glowing faintly, Sarathia picked it up with shaking hands. The war wasn't over, but something inside her had changed. The guards had run, the armies had fallen, but one human had stayed, and his courage had become a legend whispered through the stars. The wind howled through the ruins of the royal palace. Ashes floated like snowflakes covering the broken stones. Queen Sarathia stood alone in what was once her throne room. The golden walls that once sang with light were now only shadows. Her fingers brushed against the rifle again, the human weapon that refused to die. The metal still felt warm, as if it held his heartbeat. Mark Hale, the human soldier who stayed when everyone ran. His name echoed in her mind like a whisper she couldn't silence. Outside, the night sky burned with fire trails of falling ships. The war had spread to every city, and her people were running like frightened birds. But Sarathia did not run, she couldn't. Something inside her told her the human was not gone. She turned to her advisor, one of the few who returned. "Search the lower tunnels," she ordered. "Find his body." But the advisor hesitated. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "no one could survive that explosion." Sarathia's silver eyes flashed. "He is human," she replied, "and humans are known for surviving the impossible." Hours passed. Teams searched through rubble and fire. They found scorched armor pieces, broken helmets, but no human corpse then. Deep beneath the palace, they found something else, a message. Burned into the steel wall with a blade, 5 words. Carved by a soldier's trembling hand. Still guarding, still alive. "Hale," the queen's heart stopped for a moment. She touched the letters, feeling the rough edges. He was alive somehow through fire and ruin. He had survived that night. She called her war council. The generals wanted to flee the planet, but Sarathia's voice cut through their fear like thunder. While a single human fights for Zalara, she said, no queen of mine will run. Her soldiers bowed in silence. They had seen humans before, traders, workers, mercenaries, but none like Mark Hale. He was becoming something else, a symbol, a fire that refused to go out. Far below, in the tunnels beneath the palace, Mark woke in darkness. His armor was shattered, his ribs ached, his vision blurred. He coughed, the taste of blood filling his mouth. The only light came from a single flickering panel. He looked up at the ruins above him and whispered. Still guarding, he could hear movement, metal footsteps echoing in the tunnels. The Syndicate's hunters were searching for survivors. Mark grabbed his damaged rifle, its energy cell barely alive. He dragged himself against the wall. Breathing heavily, pain burned through him. But his mind was sharp. Can't let them reach her, he muttered. The words were simple, but they carried a human's unbreakable truth. Even half dead, he would fight, not for reward, not for glory, but because he made a promise. When the first hunter appeared, its red eyes glowing in the dark, Mark didn't wait. He fired. The blast lit the tunnel like lightning, one shot, one kill. His body was weak, but his will was a storm above ground. The queen felt something, a pulse faint but real. The humans called it instinct. The Zalarans called it fate. And she knew then. The soldier was still fighting. Somewhere beneath her feet, she lifted his rifle high before her people and spoke 3 words that changed everything. For the human, she said. The words spread like fire through the palace ruins. From soldier to soldier, from city to city, and across the stars, a legend began. The guards had run, but one human stayed, and his courage began to awaken something ancient in them all. Flames danced like ghosts through the tunnels beneath the ruined palace. Mark Hale moved slowly, one hand pressed to his bleeding side. Every breath felt like fire, but he kept walking. Above him, the world trembled with distant explosions. He could hear the Syndicate machines crawling through the rubble, their scanners humming like angry bees. His visor flickered, showing fragments of his surroundings, collapsed walls, broken lights, and the faint trace of energy leading deeper underground. He followed it step by step. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew why. To keep the queen safe, he whispered her name under his breath. Not out of duty, but out of something stronger. Respect, maybe hope, maybe something he couldn't name. He smiled weakly. Still guarding, he said again. A sound broke the silence. Metal scraping against stone, heavy footsteps echoing. Mark crouched low, his weapon raised. 3 Syndicate hunters appeared from the smoke, their armor black as night. They moved without emotion. Machines of war. But Mark was human, and humans, when cornered, become something no machine can predict. He waited until the first hunter came close. Then he threw a shard of metal against the wall. The echo drew their attention for half a second. Half a second was all he needed. His rifle flared to life, 1 blast, 2, 3. The tunnel filled with light and thunder. When the smoke cleared, the hunters were down. Mark leaned against the wall, shaking. He knew he couldn't keep fighting like this. He was out of energy cells, out of strength, out of time. But he wasn't out of will. He began dragging himself toward the old escape shafts. If he could reach the surface, maybe, just maybe, he could warn her far above. Queen Sarathia stood before her people. The halls of her ruined palace glowed red from the fires outside. Her voice carried through the comlinks across the capital. The Syndicate thinks we are broken, she said, but a single human stands against them still. Her soldiers lifted their heads. Her people listened, hope, that strange human thing, began to rise in alien hearts. She placed her hand on the human rifle resting beside her throne. Its power cell still hummed faintly, she whispered. Hold on, soldier. She didn't know he could hear, but somehow deep beneath the earth, Mark felt the echo of her voice. He smiled through the pain. Still guarding, he whispered again. Then the ground shook. A massive explosion roared above him, sending rocks crashing down. The tunnel collapsed behind him, sealing his path. Dust filled his lungs as he crawled toward a faint blue light ahead. It wasn't daylight, but something else, a hidden chamber. Untouched by war inside, strange symbols glowed across the walls. He stared at them, confused. Not Syndicate tech, he muttered. This is older. The air around him shimmered, and a voice, not human, not alien, spoke from the dark. You are not of this world. Yet you bleed for it, the voice said. Mark raised his rifle. Who's there? The light grew brighter, revealing an ancient machine. A guardian built long before the war. It scanned him, pausing when it saw the blood, the scars. The human eyes filled with defiance. "You protect the Queen," it said. "Then you are chosen." Mark frowned. "Chosen for what?" The machine extended a metallic arm. "To awaken the heart of Zilara," it said. "Only one who fights without fear may wield it." Mark hesitated, then touched the device. A surge of light shot through his armor, repairing fractures, sealing wounds. He gasped as his weapon transformed. Glowing with new power, he didn't understand it. But he didn't need to. He was alive, and he had work to do, far above. Sarathia felt the ground pulse. The broken lights flickered, and the palace ruins trembled with energy. Her soldiers looked up in awe. "What is that?" one asked. The Queen smiled faintly. "The human," she said. "He's not done yet." The ruins of Zilara trembled with a strange light. Deep beneath the shattered palace, the ancient chamber glowed like the heart of a sleeping star. Mark Hale stood in the center, his armor repaired, his weapon reborn. The ancient machine pulsed with blue fire as symbols danced across the walls. He could feel it inside his veins. Energy older than humanity itself. It didn't feel alien, it felt alive, like it understood him, like it chose him. The rifle hummed softly, no longer a weapon, but a part of him. He looked down at his scarred hands and whispered, "If this is what it takes to protect her, I'll take it." The machine's voice echoed again. "Your heart burns brighter than our sun's, human." Then the chamber fell silent. The power vanished into him, and Mark knew what he had to do. He climbed upward through the broken tunnels, every step sending pain through his body. But he didn't stop. Above him, syndicate drones scanned the ruins. Searching for survivors, their mechanical eyes glowed red. Mark raised his weapon, and for the first time, it answered him with light. The blast wasn't like before. It tore through metal and fire like thunder through a storm. One by one, the drones fell. The sky above the palace turned white for a moment. The invaders paused, unsure of what they were facing. The humans called it courage. The Zellarans called it madness. But the galaxy would soon call it something else. Legend. Far away, Queen Sarathia stood upon the palace balcony. The air trembled with the force of the explosion. She turned toward the horizon and whispered, "He's alive." Her advisors looked at her in disbelief. "Impossible," one said. But Sarathia smiled. "You don't understand humans," she said softly. "They only stop when their hearts do." She activated the royal broadcast channel. Her voice carried across the burning skies of Zilara. "To every soldier, to every citizen who still breathes," she said, "the human who defended your queen still fights beneath our sky. Take up your arms, not for a crown, but for the courage he gave us across the cities." Soldiers who had fled began to rise again. Citizens picked up broken rifles and scavenged armor. Children looked at the sky and whispered his name. Mark Hale, the human who stayed. In the tunnels, Mark emerged at last. The air hit his face. Cold and filled with dust, he saw the palace, broken but still standing. The syndicate army moved across the courtyard like an endless sea of shadows. Mark tightened his grip on his glowing rifle. He knew he couldn't fight them all, but he didn't need to. He just had to hold long enough for the Queen to escape or fight or live. The first syndicate walker appeared, a towering metal beast. Its cannons aimed directly at him. Mark didn't run, he charged. The weapon in his hand unleashed a storm of light. The walker exploded in a roar that shook the heavens. The rest turned toward him, focusing all their fire on one man. And still he stood, still guarding above him. The Queen watched through the smoke. Tears burned her eyes as she saw the lone figure fighting against the impossible. Every blast, every step, every scream became a song of defiance. Her people began to shout from the walls. "For the human!" they cried. "For the Queen!" Mark felt his strength fading. His armor cracked again, his legs shook. But through the dust, he saw the flag of Zilara rise again. The people were fighting. He smiled faintly, whispering to the wind, "Guess I bought you some time." Then a shadow moved above him. A syndicate commander descended from the burning sky, tall, armored, and cold as death. "You are only human," it said. Mark lifted his rifle one last time. "Exactly," he answered, and the battlefield lit up like dawn. The battlefield burned like a dying sun. Smoke twisted through the air, painting the sky with red and gray. Mark Hale stood alone in the ruins of the palace courtyard. His armor shattered, his body bleeding, but his spirit unbroken. The syndicate commander marched forward, its metal body gleaming under the firelight. Thousands of drones circled above, ready to end what one human had begun. But Mark didn't step back. He planted his feet in the dirt, raised his weapon, and whispered the words that had carried him through every storm. Still guarding, the commander tilted its head, confused by the small creature before it. "You are outnumbered," it said. "Outmatched." "Out of time," Mark smiled through the blood. "Maybe," he said, "but you're out of luck," he fired. The beam from his rifle wasn't like any human weapon now. It was alive, glowing with the energy of the Zelleran heart that pulsed within him. The blast cut through the commander's shield like paper. The explosion tore the air apart, sending shockwaves through the ruined city. The Syndicate army turned all its guns on him, the sky filled with light and death. But Mark didn't run. He stood his ground, firing until his weapon melted in his hands. His armor cracked, his vision blurred, yet his heart refused to stop above. The Queen watched from the palace balcony, her eyes filled with tears as she saw the last human fighting alone against an empire. Every explosion reflected in her eyes like falling stars. "He's still fighting," she whispered. For us, her generals urged her to flee. But she shook her head. "No," she said. "We fight beside him." She raised the human's rifle she had carried since the fall. "For the human," she shouted. The cry spread across the city, echoing through every broken street. "For the human," and the world answered. Thousands rose from the ashes, carrying weapons, tools, anything they could hold, civilians, soldiers, children. They all ran toward the fire, not away from it. The courage of one human had become a storm that no army could stop. The Syndicate forces began to falter, their machines confused by the chaos of living will. For the first time they saw fear not in their enemies, but in themselves. Mark fell to one knee. The light around him flickered. The power fading, he looked toward the palace, and through the smoke he saw her, the Queen, standing tall, her people behind her. She raised the rifle in salute, and in that silent moment, human and alien became one heartbeat. Mark smiled. "That's enough," he whispered. He pressed his hand against the ground, releasing the last surge of energy from the ancient core. A blinding light burst across the battlefield, sweeping through the Syndicate army like a tidal wave. Machines turned to dust. Ships fell from the sky. The invaders were gone. When the light faded, there was silence. The city still burned, but the enemy was no more. At the center of the crater, only ashes remained. The armor of the human soldier lay empty, but the ground beneath it glowed softly like a sleeping heart. Queen Sarathia walked to the center and knelt. She placed her hand on the ashes, her voice trembling. "You saved a world that was not your own," she said. "You taught us what courage means." Tears fell from her eyes, landing on the broken earth, and where they touched, the soil glowed brighter. Years passed. The story of the human spread across the stars. Every world whispered his name. Mark Hale, the guardian of Zellara, the man who stayed when all others ran. A statue stood in the rebuilt palace courtyard, half human, half Zellaran, holding a glowing rifle to the sky, and beneath it, carved in both languages, were the words that became eternal, still guarding.